There are several different forms of human trafficking, but the two most common are sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Victims of labor trafficking are commonly deceived or forced into jobs where they are paid little to nothing. These victims are often bonded to their traffickers through debt they've accrued during the recruitment process. This debt increases over time with excessive interest rates and wages too low to pay the debt off. This makes it nearly impossible for exploited workers to get out of bondage. Traffickers may also confiscate workers' IDs or threaten to report illegal workers in order to prevent them from leaving. This type of exploitation is common in the manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism industries. Next, listen to Mark's story. Mark is a victim of labor trafficking from the UK who was forced to work throughout Europe.
I had no income whatsoever. The guy pulled up next to me in a car, quite an expensive car. He said that as well as working, he'd give me somewhere to stay. He'd provide food for me. He'd try to make me as comfortable as possible. And he'd pay me £50 a day. My boss decided to go up to the site that his family lives on. And there everything went very, very quickly downhill. He stopped paying me anything at all. We were working up to 15 hours a day. And it's very, very physical work, very, very heavy work. So there were a lot of broken-looking people. There was no rest. Every waking minute of every day was spent working somehow. There were, I'd say, around 20 other workers on the site who were working for other members of my boss's family. They were kind of physically punished for the slightest little thing. They were beaten for not working fast enough. I've seen people attacked with work tools, with spades, with pickaxes. They had their heads shaved. They lived 15 men in a horse box. Yeah, it was very much like a concentration camp. A lot of them were extremely hopeless. They'd been there. There were guys there who'd been there for 5 years or more, they'd given up all hope. They couldn't see any way to leave. They'd seen people try to run away in the past. And always, every single time, a day later, 2 days later, they'd be dragged back. At the time I was 24 years old. I have a decent education. I'm physically fit. How could this happen to me, sort of thing? It's really, really difficult for people to understand that it could happen to anybody. It just requires that somebody's circumstances change, that things get worse for them, that they're able to kind of land in that situation. Absolutely anybody it could happen to.
Victims of sex trafficking are forced or manipulated to work in the commercial sex trade. The majority of these victims are women and girls trapped working for the financial gain of a pimp. In many cases, this pimp may even be the victim's boyfriend. Sex trafficking can be very hard to identify. Often, victims may appear to be working of their own will, but are actually being monitored by a trafficker who will punish the victim for acts they deem unfavorable. Other common forms of trafficking include forced marriage, domestic servitude, forced begging, harvesting and selling of organs, and forced criminal activity. Victims of all forms share one common experience: the loss of freedom.